Patton gave the order before anyone understood what it meant. "Bring them in." His officer turned. "Sir?" Patton didn't repeat it. He just kept his eyes on the civilians standing near the road. All of them. An hour earlier, he had come out of the wire. He didn't speak about what he had seen in there. Not to the officers beside him, not to anyone. He just stood at the edge of the road, looking at the town the way you look at something when you're deciding what it is. The camp was behind him. The town was in front of him. Both existed in the same afternoon light, same sky, same air, separated by maybe 2 kilometers of road. The smell was still on him. A group of civilians had gathered near the road. Not formally, not by order, just present. The way people gather when something unusual is happening nearby, before curiosity turns into fear. One of them spoke first. We didn't know what was happening there. He listened, not interrupting, not reacting, just watching. They didn't see anything, another voice said. It was guarded. We weren't allowed inside. They didn't know, they hadn't seen. It wasn't theirs. That word came again. We didn't see inside. See? Patton's attention didn't shift away from them. It went deeper into what they were saying, because there was a difference between not knowing and not seeing, and they were choosing that word very carefully. He looked at them, then past them, then toward the direction of the camp. Not one of them turned to follow his gaze, not once. That was the part that settled it, not the words, the absence of that movement. He stepped forward, not quickly, just enough to close the distance so this could no longer feel like a conversation happening at a safe remove. Now they could see him clearly, and for the first time, some of them stopped speaking. This time the officer didn't hesitate, because whatever Patton had decided, it wasn't about listening anymore. That was an hour ago. Now the order was moving through the town, not loudly. The way clear orders move, quickly, directly, without needing to be repeated twice. Soldiers fanned out along the road and into the nearby streets, not running, not shouting, just moving with purpose, knocking on doors, stepping into open spaces, gesturing more than speaking. At first it didn't feel like anything serious. A few civilians stepped out casually, wiping hands, adjusting coats, asking quiet questions. Where are we going? What is this about? The answers were short. Come with us. Nothing more. That was enough to shift something. Because when soldiers stop explaining, people start understanding. A man tried to laugh it off, said something under his breath to the person beside him. The kind of comment meant to make the moment feel normal. It didn't land. No one answered him. A woman stood in her doorway a second too long before stepping out. She closed the door behind her carefully, like she expected to come back soon. Others didn't wait. They stepped out immediately, already reading the situation, in the posture of the soldiers, in the silence, in the direction everyone was being moved, toward the same place, the place no one had looked at earlier. The road began to fill, not crowded, just enough that no one could pretend this was random anymore, small groups forming without intention, people walking beside neighbors they weren't speaking to. One man tried again. "We told you," he said to the soldier beside him. "We don't know anything about that place." The soldier didn't answer, didn't look at him, just kept walking. That silence did more than any argument could have, because it made clear that whatever explanation they carried was no longer part of the conversation. Further ahead, another group had already slowed, not stopped. Just enough that the soldiers guiding them raised a hand. "Keep moving." No anger, no force, just direction. And the closer they moved, the more the air began to change. Not stronger, just harder to ignore. One civilian noticed it first. His head tilted slightly. His pace broke for half a step before he corrected it. He didn't say anything. But the man beside him noticed the hesitation, "What?" he asked quietly. The first man shook his head. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Others felt it too. A woman lifted her hand toward her face and then lowered it again quickly, like she didn't want to draw attention to the reaction. Another man stopped speaking mid-sentence. Didn't continue. The road ahead looked the same. It wasn't. Behind them, the town still existed. Familiar, ordered, understandable. Ahead, the first structures of the camp came into view. No one pointed at them, no one announced them. They were just there. And as soon as they appeared, the last of the talking stopped. Not because anyone told them to be quiet, because there was nothing left to say that still made sense. One civilian slowed again, more noticeably this time. A soldier stepped closer. "Keep moving." The man nodded, but he didn't look up, not yet, because the next few steps were going to take that away completely. No one announced the entrance. There was no moment where someone said, "This is it." They just crossed into it. And the first reaction wasn't loud. It was hesitation. A woman near the front slowed without meaning to. Her foot landed, but the next step didn't come right away. She stayed there for just a second, long enough for the soldier beside her to notice. "Keep moving," he said. She nodded, but her eyes didn't move the same way. They stayed forward, fixed, like they had caught something they couldn't place yet. A man a few steps behind her looked once, quick, sharp, then immediately dropped his gaze to the ground, like the act of not looking again might undo what he had just seen. It didn't. It stayed. They moved deeper, and with each step the details stopped being separate. Barracks, bodies, figures that were still alive, but only just. Not images, not stories, physical presence, close enough that distance didn't exist anymore. One civilian let out a sound, not a word, not quite a gasp, just something that came out before he could stop it. He pressed his lips together immediately after, like he had broken some kind of rule by reacting. A woman turned her head sharply to the side. "No," a soldier said, quietly. She turned back. That was the break, not the order, not the walk through the gate. That moment, when looking away was no longer allowed. Because once that happened, everything else followed. They were moved through in a line that didn't stay straight. It shifted, slowed, stopped in places, started again. Not because the soldiers didn't know where to take them, but because the civilians kept breaking the rhythm, stopping, looking, trying not to look. One man covered his mouth with his hand and kept it there. Not dramatically, just holding it, like he needed something between himself and what he was breathing in. Another shook his head once, then again, then kept shaking it slowly as he walked, like the motion had become separate from thought. Keep moving. They moved, further in. At one point, the line stopped completely. Not by order, by resistance. A man had stepped back, not far, just enough to break the flow. "I didn't know," he said, louder this time. No one answered him, because the sentence didn't hold anymore. A soldier stepped closer. "Move." The man didn't move, then he did. Further in, civilians were stopped, turned, directed, not just to see, to act. A group was brought to a section where bodies had been left where they fell. The order came without explanation. "Move them." No one spoke at first. One man looked at the ground, then at the soldier, then back again. He didn't reach down, not immediately. The soldier didn't raise his voice. He repeated the order. And this time, the man bent, slowly. Like his body resisted the movement even as it followed it. Others followed after him, not together, not in sync, just one after another. Seeing something is one thing. Touching it is another. Feeling the weight of it is something else entirely. The camp didn't change. It didn't explain itself. It didn't respond to denial. It just stayed there, forcing each person through the same sequence. Look, understand, move. And by the time they reached the far end, there was no version of the earlier words left that still made sense. They said they didn't know. Now they had seen. And that difference couldn't be undone. They didn't come out the same way they went in. That was the first thing that was clear. Not because anyone said it, because of how they moved. The group that stepped back out didn't hold the same shape it had before. The loose clusters were still there, neighbors beside neighbors, people from the same street still near each other. But the way they carried themselves had changed. Slower, quieter, more careful with where they looked. A woman who had spoken earlier, one of the first to say she didn't know, now kept her eyes fixed on the ground just ahead of her steps. Not in avoidance, just fixed. Like looking anywhere else might bring something back she wasn't ready to see again. No one stopped her. No one spoke to her. There was nothing left to ask. A man behind her opened his mouth once, like he was about to say something, maybe to the soldiers, maybe to the people around him. No words came out. He closed it again and kept walking. That happened more than once. Small starts that didn't turn into anything. Because whatever language had existed before, the explanations, the distance, the careful phrasing of "we didn't know," didn't hold any more. Not in the same way. The soldiers didn't push them now. They didn't need to. The direction was already clear. Out. Back toward the road. Back toward the town. But it wasn't the same road anymore. One soldier near the exit watched them pass one by one. He didn't look at their faces for long, just long enough to register the change, then moved on to the next. There was no visible reaction. Just observation. Patton didn't follow them back. He remained where he had been. The civilians moved past him, back toward the town, back toward the same streets, back toward the same doors, back toward the same rooms. But those spaces weren't untouched anymore. Not in the way they had been before. Because now the camp wasn't just something nearby. It was something they had walked through, seen, in some cases, carried. The civilians had said they didn't know. They had said it carefully, repeatedly. Now that sentence had no weight. Not because they had chosen to change it, because it no longer had anywhere to stand. The space between the town and the camp was gone, not physically. Patton turned back toward the wire. There was still more inside that needed to be documented. That part wasn't finished yet.